In this video, I want to talk specifically about some advantages to increasing the size of the United States House of Representatives. I've talked a lot in previous videos about the lawsuit, about the history of the House, the constitutional, historical, legal background. But let's say we're so fortunate as to get a ruling that requires an increase in the House of Representatives, which again, if we get a favorable ruling in court, would go back to Congress. Congress would deliberate, have some hearings, and achieve that equal as is practicable, which we've addressed in earlier videos. But I want to enumerate a number of advantages that there's some fairly extensive analysis that's been done. And I want to just share some of those things because many of these things would not be intuitive. The first thing people would say is, well, if you want to add more reps, that means you want bigger government. Here's what's interesting, and the first point I want to make is aggregate spending actually, according to the data, drops dramatically when you add members to the lower chamber in a bicameral model here. Analysis has been done by Dr. Mark Thornton on the UK as well as here in the United States. There's also a couple of Stanford PhDs, Joey Chen and Neil Malhotra, who analyzed actually state by state here in the United States, looking across about a 40 to 50 year time frame. And as there have been changes in the House of Representatives in each state, of course you can't analyze the federal government because it's been the same for 100 years. But when you look at these places, these governmental bodies like the House of Commons, like individual states within the Union, you find that the data strongly correlate. If there's more representatives, you have dramatic reductions in aggregate spending. And I encourage you to go to the apportionment.us website. It has some links to these articles, as well as you can research some of this on 30,000.org, another great website with a lot of rich information. So aggregate spending drops. Even if you add legislators, it's more than made up in the fact that the actual spending by government drops dramatically. Because realize that the portion of the federal budget that's earmarked to House of Representatives, members and staff, is a fraction of 1% versus the 99+% of the actual spending going on at the federal level. So that's the first one. The second one I want to address is the issue of freedom. An analysis was done by the president of 30,000.org, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Quittem. He analyzed state by state in the United States, looking at district sizes of the House chamber in each state relative to various freedom indices that exist. There's the Mercatus, there's the PRI, and Fraser indexes that analyze a state's regulatory, nanny state, taxation, social impositions of regulations on the people living in the state. All these things get rolled up into what's called a freedom index. And when you look at overlaying district size of each individual state's lower house chamber with freedom indices, what you find is something incredibly fascinating and highly correlated, which is this. The smaller the district, the greater the freedom. Now I want to draw two very specific examples on this. One is tiny New Hampshire, and I don't use tiny to be belittling, but I'm comparing tiny New Hampshire to large California. New Hampshire has a population of roughly 1.3 million people. And do you know how many House reps they have in their state House? They have 400. Now let's contrast that with a state that's 25 times or more larger, 30 times larger in the state of California. New Hampshire has 400. Do you know how many state assembly members California has? 80. 1/5 the amount, but yet 25 to 30 times as large. Each district in New Hampshire represents about 3,000 to 3,500 people. In California, in contrast, that number's over 450,000 and continues to grow. It'll be close to 500,000 probably with this 2010 census. So you've got Live Free or Die New Hampshire that scores very high on the freedom indices. And you have California, which chronically drops to the bottom on freedom indices because of all the regulatory issues here. And they've got, by far and away in the country, the largest districts. So it's completely illustrative of the fact that if you get smaller districts, you get better government.